Leezá, welcome. Leezá, welcome. I'm going to start again. I want to make sure I'm saying it correctly. It's such a beautiful name.
Thank you. Hold on one second.
Leezá, welcome. So, why is that starting? We're just going to like clear. Leezá, welcome to Vitality, Women Leading Audaciously. I'm so delighted to be here with you today. As a woman, as a mother, as a lover of life and a seeker of truth, I see. And I wanted you to tell your story about your life to the best of your ability, kind of how you got to be where you are. There are a lot of women listening today who are looking at their path, reflecting on their life, and are inspired by women just like you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Helene, for having me. I'm excited and to be with all these beautiful women. I think my story is not that unusual for many. I grew up in a family that was not, my parents did their absolute best, and yet it was a difficult childhood. My father came back from Vietnam, so there was a lot of physical and emotional violence. And my mother was not in a place of power as a woman. And so I really struggled as a young person and ended up becoming very angry and hard, thinking that was the way to box myself through. It certainly helped me to survive, with the aggression that I experienced. It was not, however, a joyous and a fulfilling way to walk through the world. And a story that really sticks in my mind quite clearly is that when I was at the university and I was at a party and I met a young man, he was quite fine looking, I thought, and we were having a conversation and he said to me, you are so hard that someone could walk on you with cleats on and you wouldn't feel it. And I was just like, I mean, I was so shocked. I just stood there literally. I probably had my mouth gaping open because that was not what I was feeling inside. And yet that apparently was what I was expressing outside of myself. So that took me down, I mean, among other things, of course, but that really was a pivotal moment for me to start doing some very deep work of what is going on inside of me. Who am I? Where have I come from? What do I believe? How do I see myself and others in the world? And so I did my work and I
How old were you? Sorry.
I was in my teens.
Oh, wow.
My late teens, and I started doing a lot of reading, spiritual reading, Zen books. I did the Course in Miracles, Edgar Cayce, Viktor Frankl, Marianne Williamson. I mean, I really just started educating myself, also doing different trainings. And yeah, I came to a place of really loving myself and sorting things out and understanding my parents did the best that they could. And yet it was hard. And I don't want to do it that way. And I knew that when I had children, I was going to do it totally differently. And then I had my first child, my son, and he was about my former husband. I spent most of my life overseas, as I'd shared with you. And so my former husband is with Lufthansa. He's a pilot. So he was gone 20 days a month. I was alone in a foreign country.
Yeah.
And 24/7. And I remember a day, I think my son was probably around 9 years old, and he really never slept well. He was one of those kids that push you to the limit. God, I loved him with every fiber of my soul. And I remember one night that he was just crying and crying. And I thought, oh my gosh, I could hurt this child. And that was another Zen bell. I was like, wow. And then I realized, although I had really transformed myself in the world, the only parenting training that I had was through my parents.
Yeah.
I had no other pictures or books, or I mean, who reads parenting books when they're in their early 20s, right? It just doesn't happen. And so that's I started doing the work all over again, and became a mediator and looked at best practices in communication and really dug in again into the Course in Miracles. And I read a book called The Continuum Concept, which I can highly recommend, about how the Yaquana Indians in South America live as a culture and how peaceful they are. And it's because how they are with their children. And so that really then put me on a totally different track, which is, evolved into the work I do in the world and also the relationship I have with my people.
So beautiful. And there's so many parallels in my journey and your journey.
Mm.
I was raised in the Christian faith with a Jewish father, and Course in Miracles became the backdrop. So we weren't just at Bible study on Tuesday nights and church group on Friday and Saturday choir and Sunday, church service. But then we ended up having Course in Miracles, at the house in between all the church stuff. And it
Wow.
was a huge part of my upbringing. But I too just was really interested. But I don't know that, I mean, that cleats comment, I could understand why that would be, really eye-opening for you. But
Mm.
kudos to you for having that awareness at such a young age. Um, my inquiry was around, like, why are we fighting these wars? And what
Yeah.
is the difference between Judaism and Taoism and Taoism and Confucianism and Buddhism and
Yeah.
um, Islam? I didn't understand why we would be fighting. That was kind of my
Right.
my
There's
my
one God.
right. And
Yeah.
so this is, and I may offend somebody by saying this, but my conclusion after years of inquiry and search, I mean, in between my go-sees in New York City, before I moved to Europe, I would spend my time at the Theological Institute on the in the 50s on the East Side. It was around the corner from my agency. And I mean, I would just read for hours and hours every day. And
Wow.
but you do good, you be good, and it's all good. And that might be offensive to some people. But that was, what I came out of it with. Like, actually, there is one God. And yeah. And so that's just been it's still involved in my life today, of course, religion and spirituality. And it's a huge centerpiece for my existence. And it's never ending, this work on transformation, self-realization, and that awareness that, we are all connected no matter where we are. And I think living abroad really brought that into focus.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's so true. When you go beyond your own borders, and it really doesn't matter what country you're going beyond, you recognize that there are differences, but the similarities are so much more vast. We're all human. I mean, and that sounds like so cliche, we're all human. But when you really see the mother in Kenya just making sure that her child is fed, or
Mm-hmm.
the father in the back hills of northern Thailand wanting to make sure his daughter gets some education, like whatever it is, you recognize that we literally are all the same, right? We're
Yeah.
all in this human experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I was so fascinated by, like you, I just have never been able to get enough. The more I learn, the more I know there is to learn. But
Right.
I wanted to observe how, like, the grandmothers were healing their grandchildren, whether
Mm.
I was in Singapore, Hong Kong, Greece, or France, and there were all these similarities in the healing traditions. Also, we all want our children to be happy. We
Mhm.
all want to have, food, and we all have these desires to belong and be loved and to love.
Mhm.
And there were so many similarities in gathering the herbs of the mountains and broths and soups. And after you see these similarities, yes, the land is different, the herbs are different, but they're perfectly designed for the healing
Yeah.
of, the children and the grandchildren and even the grandmothers. It's
Yeah.
quite beautiful. We are meant to do it together.
The earth gives us what we need, and I find, especially in today's world, it is really one of the greatest crimes I feel against humanity has been the public, how should I say, the advertising of medication as a need, that it has a place, obviously. However, we are made, the earth gives us what we need. We have these incredible bodies if we give it the opportunity to be fed. I love the word you always use, vitality, right? We have a natural vitality because of the spirit that lives us. And when we connect with that and thrive from that place, then health has to be the result. It aligns itself.
Love how you said that, spirit that lives us.
Mm.
That's brilliant. That is the truth of it.
Yes.
Because vitality is a word I chose intentionally, because it's way more than just eating fresh vegetables and fruits. It is that, right? But it is so much more than that.
Well, and vita comes from life, right? So the life
Mm,
force that is that exactly, that lives us. Yeah, beautiful.
totally. You talked about how parenting taught you a whole nother level of self-awareness. Those are my words, not yours. So,
Mhm.
but I don't want to put words in your mouth. But so could you talk a little bit more about the value that has had in your journey?
Mhm. I definitely would encourage that use of words, awareness. So I think the gift in the upbringing that I had had that was in such contrast to how I wanted to walk with my children was understanding that I had a choice, that there wasn't a predetermined role as parent and predetermined role as child, but that's a relationship. And somebody said to me many years prior to me having children is, you don't raise children, you get to know them.
Mm.
And so what I also recognize is that goes the other way around. Our children get to know us. And so who did I want to be in the world, and who was I being for them to get to know? And so that was that distinction of self-knowledge and self-studentship, of looking at myself and making myself the study of my own, the content of my own study, if you will, and seeing what could I do better? Where were my fears? Where was my anger? Why was my anger there? Was it justified? If I want to help my child learn, how is punishing helping? Oh,
Mhm.
what's the difference between consequences and punishing? How can I encourage them to have confidence? And what is discipline? When is discipline necessary? What is
Mhm.
self-discipline? So all of those distinctions and learning on my own helped me then to be in relationship with them. And they really have always been my teachers.
Mm.
Always my teachers.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That is a fact. And I think a lot of the women listening today are like you and me, mothers, and also, working, building our businesses and doing our work. Most of us purposefully or on our way to finding purposeful work.
Mhm.
And it can be challenging because the list of to-dos is unrelenting. It's never complete. And we're oftentimes very busy. This is the first generation that we not only are allowed to, but we are expected to do all of it, right? Run the household, be the chef, be the housekeeper, be
Mhm.
the mother, sometimes also educator, especially during COVID, the wife sometimes, or divorcee as a single mom that I am and have been for the last, 12 or 13 years. So it's very demanding. It was just our grandmothers that it was taboo to work,
Mhm.
nor were there possibilities. So it's new. It's really, really new. So how did you and do you achieve that balance for yourself? And what kind of tools did you find were helpful for you in managing it
Mhm.
all?
Mhm. So I really love the way that you express that, and that we really end up having to do it all, right? And it used to bother me when people would say, "Well, are you a mother or do you work?" It's like that's a redundant question, because not
Mhm.
only do you work as a mother, you may also be working outside the house.
Mhm.
So it's not like it's either or.
Not
And so,
anymore.
so how do we be with that? For myself, what's always been very important is to know what do I value, and it's a
Mm.
big thing. I also facilitate strategic planning, or I had in the past. I'm moving away from that gratefully to work basically with women. Um, but one of the things is, what are your values? What is your vision? And what is your purpose? That's what I would do in strategic planning. And so for myself to always know, what do I value?
Mhm.
And the basics of that hasn't changed over time, but how it expresses itself. So when my children were younger, I've always valued connection is very important to me. Connection and kindness are two of my top values. And so
Mm.
that looked very different when the children were young, and I would spend time playing with them, on the ground, rolling with them outside, running, doing crafts, whatever it was. Or today, when I have young adult children and they need me for something and I'm busy, and I will say to them, you are so important to me. I want to focus on you. I'm going to finish this. And when I'm done with this, I'm going to carve out, we're going to have 2 hours of just us time. So to be clear on what our values are, and then wherever our family or life circumstances are, how do those values apply then? And that may
Mhm.
change in a month, or as we've
Mhm.
seen with these current circumstances of the pandemic, it may be changing daily, right? But to have what is important to us be the anchor that we keep coming back to, whether it's
So
on a daily or a minute by minute basis.
yeah, I love that fluidity because it may change, right? It's not static, but that anchor though, I think is something that is innate to a certain degree. Some of the components, right, might change in terms of what you value today based on the circumstances of your life, but not the values that your mother wanted or your father wanted or your society expects, those kinds of things. I think it's really important. So for those of you who are listening, to remember what your values are, to get aligned to what that is. And it's in the, for you at your core, what is your anchor? And oftentimes it takes some digging. Sometimes it's really clear, but for some of us, it needs to get unveiled, uncovered.
So an exercise that I do that maybe your listeners will appreciate is to just like do a mind dump on a page of just everything that is valuable to you, like color and nature and love and hard work. Like just throw it all out there. It's a beautiful experience also. And then from all of that, you get to pick your top 5.
Love it.
Right. And so when you go around, you circle those, and then from those top 5, you pick number 1 for yourself. And it's interesting because often my clients are like, wow, I never knew that. And so now they have, but then they can start seeing it. So they go through their world, their day, their relationships. It's like, oh, there it is again. Oh, there it is again. Oh, there's that one over there. So they start to get to know how they're living their values in their world.
Absolutely. And the quality of our life is determined by our being, right? How we're being out in the world. I know that's not correct English, but I'm saying it intentionally. It's in my world too. We're in the
if we can put Google into a dictionary, we can put our being in the dictionary.
Right. I love it. Yeah. And if we can increase the joy and the happiness, the peacefulness and the freedom that we experience in our lives, and that's directly correlated to how we're living into our values and how we're prioritizing our day based on that value. So that becomes the guiding light. And it is the difference between heaven and hell, joy and, chaos, and all the things that we want and we desire for our lives can be determined really with this exercise that you just outlined that we all should do. And maybe even we need to do some inventory sometimes just to regroup. What is our anchor today? Because it's different. Like you said, when my daughter was young, it was completely different than what it is today.
It's really, I love that you say that, because especially in the times that we're in right now, I have found nature has always been, I've always valued nature and it's always had a great meaning to me. I have found in the last year and a half that it is my healing energy. It's my world. It's my home. You were speaking earlier about, the earth giving us the food that we need and our bodies being able to use that in a healthy way, and to recognize that. So when I go on a walk, I'm not just walking, I'm really listening for the trees, the birds, the wind. I'm looking at the leaves. I'm feeling the bark. Today, I picked up this moss. I'm here in the Northwest. It was like, how big was it? It was almost as big as a baby, really. And it was heavy and it had fallen off of a tree. So the one side had tree bark on it and the other side was just this thick, rich green moss. And I held it in my hands almost really with the reverence of a baby. And I thought, there's a world in here. Like if we put this apart, there's organisms and nutrients and everything. So this time, so that changing of our values, or maybe they become more, it's kind of like that fishbowl, what do they have that on the bottom of the computer where one thing gets really, the magnifying glass, right? Where one app gets bigger. I find that different parts of my life, or maybe different days, one value really becomes more magnified and then it kind of recedes, and the next day, then maybe it's another one.
I love that. And it gives us permission to be ever changing and ever present to the change, because that is the only constant, isn't it? Autumn comes and winter will fade into winter, and so on and so forth. Yeah. You were talking about something earlier that really strikes a chord with me, and I think it's so important that we address this. All of our children go through phases of difficulty, and you said that your children, your greatest teacher, and teachers. And for me, I found that to be the same thing. I can't even put into words very well how much of a teacher she has been, my daughter has been for me, and what role we play as their guide, or as their as their supporter. And there's so many different words we can use. But what have you noticed is the value of your own personal work, growth and development, and how it has helped your children throughout their upbringing?
Oh, that is such an awesome question. So two examples come to mind. One, when one of my daughter and one of my sons. So when my daughter was younger and I heard something break, and I went in the living room and there was a vase broken on the floor, and my little blonde-headed 5-year-old's looking at me, and I said, did you break that vase? And she shakes her head, no.
Mm.
And I said, are you sure? Yes.
Mm.
And then I said, this is a great trick for small children. I said, did you maybe break it a little bit? And then she said, yes, right? She could admit it, a little bit of breaking it. So later we got in a conversation after we cleaned it up and stuff. And that night it bothered me that she didn't tell me the truth first. So I said to her, why didn't you, like when mama asked you why did you not tell me at first? And she said, oh, because when you ask me a question, I tell you the truth, you get angry, and I don't like that.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that's a really good point. So I said, okay, I'll make you a deal. From now on, when I ask a question, or even if I don't, you just tell the truth and I won't get angry. She was like, okay.
Mm.
And that's what she did. But then that's where my work began, because when things happen, if I didn't have anger, if I wasn't going to use anger as the response, then what do? Like, stuff comes down the pipeline you're not okay with, it doesn't align with your values, or it was against an agreement, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do with that then? And so that really shaped our family. I had to do tremendous work. And it's really amazing in our family, when people visit us, they're like, I can't believe you actually told your children that, or I can't believe your son actually told you that. Because in our family, that's just such a given now.
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful.
That's one example. And another one I'll give you, and this was with my son, and this is the value of consistency and knowing yourself. So my son was 18 and he's 6'4", good looking kid. And I call him the peaceful giant. Like, he literally won't hurt an ant. He will pick them up and move them out of the way. So, but he's tall enough, he could put his chin on the top of my head. So he's a big, beautiful man. And this was a point in time, my former husband and I had separated, and it was a difficult time. And we used to have the rule in the house. So it was just my daughter, my son, and myself in the house at this time. And we'd had the rule that at 10 o'clock, the internet went off. I had a master switch for electricity. And so I would turn off the internet and other electronics at this time. This was in Europe and a while ago. You couldn't do that in America today. Anyway, so I turned it off. And I went in the kitchen to get something, and I came back, and I was passing by the study. I see the lights on again. I thought, that's odd. I thought I turned that off. So I go back in, I turn it off, and then I'm walking upstairs. And as I start walking upstairs, my son's coming downstairs, and he said, why'd you turn off the internet? And I said, well, because it's, 10 o'clock on a school night. He said, I want it on. And I said, well, that may be the case. I said, but the agreement is, and he said, I want it on. And I was like, okay. Now, and I have to underline again, this gentle giant, but the family structure had changed. His father was gone. So there was a lot of difficulty for both children in that. And I looked at him, and what my children know from me from the years is that if I say it, I mean it. And I mean what I say. And so, and I had my daughter there too. So she was younger, and I needed to make sure that the rules that we agree upon stay agreed upon, and that there's no exception to that unless we discuss it. So his just insisting wasn't going to work. So he came up to me and he kind of chest bumped me. I was like, wow. And now I have a 6'4" human, it's like, and we never were physical. And I could tell he was at that age, right, where most Native peoples take the boys away when they're 12, and the men raise them through puberty because they need to get that testosterone under control.
Yeah.
Right? That doesn't just get to have free reign. And so now here we are, his father's gone, who had been the alpha male. So I probably took 30 seconds. I mean, I gave myself time, and I thought, all right, you got a lot of pieces moving here. And I thought, whatever you say now is going to have an impact on everything. And I looked at him and I said, so here's the deal. And I had to be clear on this if I was going to follow through. And I was. I said, you have two choices. You can go in that room and turn on the internet, and tomorrow morning you pack your bag and you leave. He was 18. Or you can go back upstairs and leave that off. And the important thing in that situation for me, Helene, was that I needed to know where I stood. I needed to be willing to carry through on that. And because of the way I've raised my children, he knew that I would have. And he turned around, he walked upstairs. I spoke to him recently about that. He has no recollection of that situation.
Interesting.
And so that for me is the value of that self-awareness and that self-studentship, is how how am I living in the world and how am I living up to my word in the world? And these past year and a half, that these months we've been through as a culture, boy, I tell you, that has been, the volume on that has been turned up loudly. How am I in the world? And how am I dealing with every conversation and even every thought I have?
Yes.
That's really valuable.
That's fascinating. And I mean, I think every parent listening who has had a full grown child, because at 18, they're grown physically. There's always been that moment. I don't know that I've been as strong as you, and the child in a home without the father, because their children are always looking for the boundary.
Yes.
And they're always going to push up against it. And it has challenged absolutely everything, taken more of me than I knew I had to give, and stretched me further than I thought I could go. But I know that when I do my work, when my daughter's in a struggle, that there's a change instantaneously in her. And it's happened enough times by now that I know it's magic. So they really are our teachers if we're willing to look honestly at ourselves and do the hard work. Because I thought that I was accepting her, but I was maybe at 70%.
Right.
But when I was able to take my acceptance to like 90, everything changed.
Well, and here's the beautiful thing in what you're sharing, Helene. For me, one of the beautiful things in what you're sharing is that what a gift you're offering her is that, and did you say that you stretch beyond what you thought you could, which is welcome to parenting. That you made yourself so big that you could hold that container for her to feel safe in.
Yeah.
Right. And that, boy, what a gift for both of you. So yes, she's reflecting back to you, and you're the one though that held it that way for her.
True. Thank you. And it's like they're the expression of our unexpressed subconscious patterning. So it's such a gift to be able to do the work on that level, if we're willing to go there, because it takes courage, it takes honesty, and it takes radical responsibility. I don't know that I understood the level of responsibility that it is to be a parent when I had children, but I certainly do now. And making your children feel like they can be honest with you, I think, has been probably the most valuable thing as she's gone into her adolescent and now teenage years.
Yes.
And that's on us. Like if your children are lying to you, it's not because of them. I mean, it's because they're honest with us to the degree at which we allow them to be, how comfortable and safe it is to be honest. It's a big one. Gosh. It's a really big one. My goodness, time is getting away from us. I really want to learn about the work you do with parents, moms. So if you could tell us a little bit about, and I know you've got a bunch of programs, but which program did you want to talk about in the time we have left?
Well, I think I'll touch on two. I'll just touch on one and then speak about the other one. The one is the Parenting Success Blueprint that I have. It's an online training, and it takes people through what I have in the book, Connected Parent, Empowered Child, 5 areas of living to thrive. So all kind of life skills, building self-esteem, developing discipline, dealing with conflict and bullying. And it takes you through in a really consequential and beautiful way. And that is online, and people can find the information from yourself or on my website. The one I really would love to speak about, and you have inspired so much of what you shared today, is so aligned with the work I do in Woman Undaunted, which is a year-long program.
Nice.
And it's women. I take a maximum of 10 women, so it's an intimate group, and you are with a cohort. And I'm starting a new cohort at the beginning of the year, a couple of them. You go through the whole year, and we have two sessions a month with a Facebook group. And it's really talking about and working through and looking at the parts of ourselves that we want to grow and celebrating ourselves. So I have 4, each quarter is separated. The first one is clarity. The second quarter is ownership. The third one is resolution, if there are areas that aren't working for you. And the fourth quarter is excellence. So looking at all areas of our lives, our personal, our professional, and our relationships, and so everything you're talking about with nutrition and health and exercise, and how are we living that in the world, and what areas are we out of integrity with ourselves or in our relationships or in our professional life, and what are we striving for? How can we get there? And I have very specific tools that are useful to help women, especially women, right? We don't have to fight for equality. We are equal. We need to work for equal treatment. And that's not splitting hairs. That's a whole different paradigm.
It is.
And so and Helene, unfortunately, we are the ones that are the first ones to discriminate against ourselves.
I totally agree. We need to establish justice with ourselves first and foremost.
Exactly. Beautifully said. Justice with ourselves. And we're so unaware. It's almost like the fish in water. We can identify when other people are treated poorly, but boy, to see it in ourselves. And that's why this group, to have that kind of reflection and partnership, and to see, wow, why are you doing that? What do you mean why I'm doing that? Well, did you hear what you just said? To have that kind of intimate support system and an integrous, I'm going to say, from integrity, way of walking with yourself and with others is really powerful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That sounds powerful. And it sounds deep. And it sounds like the work that women who are courageous and honest and who are ready and willing, it's the work we need to be doing in this new era, I believe.
Yes. And the Dalai Lama said, I'm not going to get this quote correct, so please forgive me, but, and it's right what you just said. He said something like, the world is going to be saved by Western women.
I believe that to be true. I love that.
Yeah. And what you're doing here, not only in your work, but also in this podcast and the community that you're bringing together, because women such as ourselves are resonating at this level. We're ready. We are looking in the world and seeing what's happening out there. And we do know at a very ancient level, we are the ones now to bring forth what's needed.
Absolutely. Oh, so powerful. So what do you need when you are resourcing yourself? Like when you are, tired, you've been doing a lot. What is your go-to lifestyle practice? Or
this is going to sound so funny. I play the native flute. As I said, I walk a native path, and I go into the forest and I play my flute.
That's so beautiful. I love it.
I mean, I'm not a flautist. It's not like I do this professionally. But when I play the flute, I don't think. It happens also when I drum, but drumming's a little has more of that percuss to it, a little more the hitting. With the flute, it comes from breath, and through the breath and just through the gentle fingers, it's like prayer for me. And so that revitalizes me, or I'm revitalized through that, I guess I should say. That's my sweet spot.
I love knowing that. It's so tender and beautiful. And it's like wind, like we don't really always pay attention to our deep breath. We don't pay attention to how wind and vibration, come together. And that's almost like the connector.
Yes, nicely said. That is so true. Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Likewise, Helene. I appreciate the invitation. And it's really wonderful for me and inspiring and comforting to know that there are women of your caliber, and as the caliber of the women listening to this now in the world, and to remember we're all connected, and to know that when stuff seems to hit the fan, to know that we are all here together and up-leveling one another.
So true. All one. Thank you.
Thank you so much.